All right, in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to build a cinematic personal brand that grows your business. So in this video, I'm going to go over the exact 4-step system that I use myself and I use with my clients to create cinematic scroll stopping content that attracts and ultimately converts clients with your personal brand. If you have any questions about this, you can always DM me the word cinematic on Instagram and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. I get a lot of DMs. So I'm going to start with the problem. A lot of business owners, a lot of content creators think that simply by posting consistently and sharing value that they're going to somehow magically get clients with their content. 6 years ago, that might have been a strategy that worked, but today in 2026, content creation is just too competitive and that strategy doesn't work. Your feed is more crowded than ever. There's more competitors posting online. More and more people are understanding the importance of content to actually grow their business, which means that attention is scattered and scarce. And the truth is, if you're a business owner and your content doesn't look and feel premium, especially if your service is, people assume that your service or your product isn't premium either. And so if you want to charge high prices, it really helps to have content that looks premium, looks expensive, and looks quality. Right? Because at the end of the day, your brand is a proxy for your business. And unfortunately for you, competitors with worse results, with worse fulfillment, with worse products are stealing your leads basically. They're getting podcast invitations, 5-6-figure contracts, just because their content and positioning is better, right? And so the truth is, it's really not about how much you post. It's about how your brand makes people feel when they land on your page for the first time. And the founders who are winning aren't posting more, they're posting better. I know I repeat this a lot, but I really want to prove to you that, this system works. For years, for over 5 years, I've been posting content. And for most of that time, I wasn't able to actually make any money or convert or monetize my audience. But once I finally understood how to create the right type of content and, create a premium personal brand, that's when everything started changing. I was able to scale from, I think, 50,000 to 80,000 followers in a few months. I started actually attracting clients who were paying me upwards of $6, $8, $10, even $12,000 for my coaching consulting business. I was recruited to join one of the biggest content coaching communities in the world as a content strategist. I started getting viral videos more consistently, and my average views, I think, doubled in the span of a few months after I finally understood and put all these 4 steps together. And I was really able to scale my coaching business up. At the end of the day, I realized that the biggest opportunity for entrepreneurs posting content isn't a new funnel, isn't running better ads. It's really creating the personal brand that looks and feels premium enough to do the selling for you. All right, so here's the exact system that I use and I'm going to go through right now. Again, it's a 4-step process. We're going to start looking at gear. Then we're going to talk about shot lists. Third, we're going to look at color grading and how important that is. And then finally, I'm going to actually walk you through the workflow that I use for myself and that I help my clients with as well to help them grow their personal brand. So let's start with the gear, right? A lot of people say, your gear doesn't matter. But if you actually want a premium personal brand and content that looks quality, you need to choose the right gear. And so there are a few key components that go into that. First of which is the camera, which is honestly the most important piece of gear that you're going to have for your personal brand. It's the most important part of your entire setup. Everything else that we're going to go over, after the camera just builds on top of it. You don't need to buy the most expensive $5,000 camera. You just need the right one, and that really comes down to having these 3 features that you can get in a lot of cameras. I'll give you my recommendation later on, but I just kind of want to walk you through the non-negotiables for creating cinematic content. First, you need 4K quality. Most modern cameras have that. Obviously, the more pixels, the 4K quality allows you to have a clear image. It allows you to crop in, everything like that. Super self-explanatory. The second is 10-bit color. This is a little bit more technical. There's 8-bit and then there's 10-bit color. And 10-bit color basically just means it captures more colors in the range of colors than 8-bit. So by having 10-bit color in your camera, you're having a lot more access to color data than standard 8-bit cameras. And this basically results when you go to color grade specifically, smoother gradients, better skin tones, and basically a color grade that's going to hold up better as you're manipulating the image instead of falling apart and starting to distort like it will if you have an 8-bit camera. So if you're really serious about creating cinematic content, creating content that looks really good, you need a camera that shoots 10-bit color. The second or the third part is really log shooting. And so log is basically just a picture profile. So it's basically a flat, low contrast color profile that allows you to capture the maximum amount of visual information in your image or in your footage. It looks gray and kind of washed out straight out of the camera when you're recording, but that really is the whole point because it gives you the most flexibility when you're color grading, allows you to do some crazy things. I shoot all my footage in log, and it is the most important part that allows me to get such good colors when I go in and end up color grading. It just looks richer, it looks more cinematic, especially if you can combine it with the right LUT, again, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but it's super important as well. So my recommended camera that has all three of these features, it's also very light and portable in terms of traveling and things like that, is the Sony ZV-E1. Again, I've linked everything here. If you actually want access to this Notion doc that I'm going over, feel free to DM me. But I've included some other alternatives as well that have log, 10-bit, and 4K. Sony a7S III, this is actually the camera that I use personally. Sony FX3 is a little bit more expensive. Sony a7 IV is better at taking photos, but it also does great at video as well. Next is really the lens, right? And I recommend you have multiple lenses typically for your camera. There are kind of three concepts I really need you to understand before investing in a lens that are going to make a big difference. First is focal length. So this is pretty basic. It just basically determines how zoomed in your shot is, right? How wide or tight your shot is. So a wider focal length, so if you have a lens, that's 16 millimeters, 24 millimeters, 35 millimeters, that's typically, more zoomed out and will allow you to capture more of your environment. So this type of lens is really good for content like vlogs, outside shots, lifestyle content, stuff where you want to show the surrounding area around you, not just kind of you. Whereas a tighter focal length, something like 50 millimeters, 85 millimeters, there are some lenses that go up to 200, 400 millimeters as well, is going to compress the background more and put more of the focus on you. And so this is really ideal for like talking head videos. So for instance, the camera that I'm filming on right now is a 50 millimeter, and so it's tighter than if I were to use a 35 millimeter. So that's something to think about as well. The second part is aperture, also known as kind of f-stop. So this does a couple things. The f-stop or the aperture value basically controls how much light enters your lens and how blurry your background gets. So the lower the number, the lower the f-stop, typically a low number is like f1.2, f1.4, 1.8. The more background blur you get in the image, it's called bokeh. And that typically gives your footage a more premium cinematic look because it separates you from your environment or from your background. Typically, you want a lens that has a low f-stop or a low aperture because it lets a lot of light in as well. So you don't need to have as much light in your scene or crank up your camera's brightness as much if you can have a low f-stop lens. Again, the lens I'm filming on right now is an f1.4. And then the last part is fixed versus variable zoom lenses. There are two types of lenses. There's a lens that has a fixed focal length, like we talked about up here. So the one I'm shooting on now is fixed at 50 millimeters. I can't zoom in, I can't zoom out. And then there's variable lenses, which allow you to zoom, kind of like your iPhone lens, for example. Typically fixed or prime lenses lead to a sharper, higher quality image, and usually a lower f-stop as well. Variable or zoom lenses just give you more flexibility because they allow you to reach different focal lengths with one lens, but typically usually have a higher f-stop as well, so they let in kind of less light. Ideally, you have a zoom lens and then also a fixed lens, which is what I have. And then, so my recommended lenses, there's a bunch, but these are the two that I recommend. This one is a zoom lens. It's good for vlogs and wider shots. And then this one is the one I'm filming on right now, is better for talking head videos. So I recommend these two lenses. The next part is really filters. This is kind of optional, but these two things are important to actually get the most out of your lenses and your camera as well. So I want to talk about a mist filter first. A mist filter, I love these things. So I'm using one on my camera right now. It's also called like a diffusion filter. It's basically a piece of glass that screws onto the front of your lens and diffuses or softens the light as it hits your sensor. And there's different strengths of it. So, you know, like for example, 1/4 mist would be stronger, would have a stronger effect than like a 1/8 mist filter. I typically use 1/8 or 1/4 as well. And it just really blooms the highlights. It leads to this cinematic quality. A lot of times it does help, especially if your camera, you know, isn't of the craziest quality. The camera can make things look a little bit too sharp or a little bit too harsh. And so the mist filter kind of adds that softness and that glow, especially to the highlights. That's going to make your image feel a little bit more like it's out of a film. In terms of how to use it, I use my mist filter as long as I'm not outside. So basically any shot I'm filming inside, I typically have a mist filter on. Again, either 1/8 or 1/4. Yeah, I don't need to go into too much depth on that. It's pretty self-explanatory. This is the mist filter that I recommend. Again, it's important to make sure that you get the right filter size for the lens you want to use it with. So different lenses have different kind of widths, and so make sure that you get the right size of mist filter for your lens. The second, and arguably kind of more important, is the variable ND filter. This is basically sunglasses for your camera. So obviously when you're outside, this is going to be very important. Basically reduces the amount of light that enters your camera without affecting your color. And it really, you know, there's a type of this ND filter, which is called a variable ND filter, which is you basically turn it and you can control how much light you want to block or how much light enters your lens, which allows you to, you know, as lighting conditions change, you can change the amount of light that your camera lets in. This is important because there's like a few settings that, or a few standard practices that make the most cinematic footage. And if you want to follow what's called the 180-degree shutter rule, which is where your shutter speed is roughly double your frame rate, in bright conditions, this is going to naturally let in too much light and kind of overexpose your image. That's why having an ND filter helps bring that exposure back down, so you can, you know, maintain the right shutter speed, ISO, things like that, while keeping the image as cinematic as possible and properly exposed. In terms of how I use it, anytime I'm outside, I screw this thing on. I basically just twist it until my exposure looks right, while keeping my other settings the same. And again, if you don't have this outside, your footage is going to look overexposed. This is the one I recommend. Again, make sure you get the right filter size for the lens that you want to use it with. The last part is really lighting. This is super important right now. So I want to talk about this concept of 3-point lighting in terms of movies, films, cinematic content. This is kind of like the go-to lighting setup. Honestly, for me, lighting is probably the most important part of having a good frame and having a high quality image. And it's really easy to do and make it look professional without actually, you know, doing too much. Again, like it doesn't really matter how good your camera or lenses are. If your lighting's bad, your shot's going to look bad too. So this is what, you know, a 3-point lighting setup looks like. You're basically facing the camera. You have a key light on one side of you to 45 degrees pointing at you. You have a fill light on the other kind of 45 degrees, which is basically a little bit less bright, pointing at your face. And then you have a backlight, which is pointing kind of at the back of your head to separate you from the background. In practice, a lot of times, and I think I go into this, I just use a two light setup where I just have the key light, which is right here in my frame right now, and then the backlight, which is over there right now. I could have like a fill light over here if I wanted to, but I think it's just overkill a lot of the time. Just in terms of terminology, key light is going to be your primary light source. It's going to be the main thing lighting up your face, and it is going to be the most important light. Again, a fill light is a little bit softer. It's on the opposite side, kind of to reduce harsh shadows if you have them. And then the backlight is positioned behind you to separate you from the background. You could also make it a different color. A lot of times in my videos, I make the background, or I make the backlight orange or blue or red, or one of my key brand colors. But again, this is really how you can set up your lighting setup to make it look super cinematic. I don't need to go a ton into the key light. I basically list the main light I use here. So I use the Amaran 300C, and I pair it with a softbox, which basically just diffuses the light and makes it less harsh as it hits my face. Again, positioned 45 degrees, to one side of you, and then above eye level, angled down at you. One pro tip here that is good to remember is make the color temperature of this main light the same number as the white balance in your camera, so that the whites look white. And this is more important when you go to color grade, but it's just it's good practice to do this. Again, I recommend these 3 lights here. So this is the main light, this is the softbox or the diffuser, and then this is going to be the light stand. Next, for the tube light, I talked about how I skip the fill light here, so we're going to go straight to the tube light. I position it behind me and basically separates me from the background. The one I have is RGB, meaning I can choose basically any color on the rainbow to dial it in at. Typically, I would choose one main brand color, which in my case is orange, and then 1 to 2 secondary brand colors, which for me are kind of like blue and red. And so when I'm filming videos, I either have the tube light set to orange, which is most of the time, or blue or red, and never kind of any other color. So your videos and your feed look consistent. This is the recommended tube light that I have. It's really good. All right, let's move on to the shot list. So once you have the right gear, it's actually time to start filming the content. And this is where the shot list becomes really important. Most creators don't really do a shot list. They just sit down, hit record, and talk to the camera, and then post the video. And ultimately, that's why their content looks bland and kind of blends in with everything else. But the creators who have really cinematic, high quality content and personal brands understand that great content isn't just heard, it's felt, right? And the way that you make people feel is through intentional visuals, not just words. And so that starts with understanding the 2 types of shots. It's really simple. A-roll is any video of you actually talking to the camera with audio, right? So right now, what I'm filming right now is A-roll, because I am talking, I am looking, talking to the camera. It's not super complicated. It's going to be the foundation of every content. It's going to be what your message is. It builds trust and positions you as an authority, right? Your words are doing that for you, the story that you're telling. These are some example clips of A-roll clips of me, right? I'm looking into the camera, or I'm looking slightly off and I'm speaking. B-roll is any footage that isn't you talking to the camera. And so this type of footage gets basically layered over the A-roll. So your A-roll is kind of like the base layer, it tells the story, and then your B-roll helps, amplify what you're saying in the A-roll. It's layered over the A-roll to make more, dynamic, cinematic, and emotionally engaging videos. Especially for entrepreneurs, B-roll does something even more powerful. It builds authority and status by showing, your life behind the brand. You could talk about your successes, your business, all you want, but actually showing what you're talking about, showing you building your business, showing the behind the scenes is going to make your message and your video way more powerful. There are really 2 types of B-roll that you should be capturing. One is BTS. So these are basically clips that you capture as you go through your day. It's kind of just like documenting what you're already doing, right? You're already living your life. Now get in the habit of filming it. These are authentic, unscripted moments that make your brand feel real, because they are. The second part is intentional clips. So this is kind of where you set things up to specifically film B-roll videos. And these are typically shots that you'll use across multiple videos, and you'll be able to bring into multiple videos in the edit. So like for instance, you at your desk, working, you want to call you at the gym. These B-roll clips can be used multiple times again and again in different videos. And you film these once, and then you basically have a library over time as you film more of this of reusable clips to pull from every time you edit. So I have some examples here. So for instance, like office and work B-roll, these are some frames that I have. They're pretty sick. Lifestyle and travel as well. I'm just kind of giving you ideas for shots that you could get. And then, gym and fitness. So all these shots are B-roll, and they really help tell my stories in a more powerful way. I have an example shot list here, and I've broken it up by, work and business shots, lifestyle and travel shots, networking and social shots, and then gym and fitness. Feel free to kind of pause and go through that, or take a screenshot. Use this list as a starting point, but then obviously adapt it to your own life and environment as you go. Next, let's look at color grading. So color grading is super important here. And this is really where you transform your footage from flat and lifeless, like we talked about earlier, from shooting in log to cinematic, okay? Just a kind of a pro tip here. If you are shooting in log, your footage is going to look washed out and gray straight out of the camera. That's okay. Again, log captures the most amount of visual information, so you have the most control in this step while color grading. And so the color grade is where we can take advantage of that. This process can be super complicated, or it can be super simple and achieve similar results. I'm always in favor of simplicity. So my entire color grading workflow comes down to 3 steps and takes about 5 minutes, or usually less. So the first part is making sure your white balance is correct. And this actually happens before you even hit record. Before you film, make sure that your camera's internal white balance, which you can choose, matches the key light white balance. Again, like I said earlier, this basically means the whites will look white and the colors won't look distorted. If these numbers don't match, if the white balance, if the Kelvin or the temperature of the light doesn't match, your image is going to look off. You're going to need to adjust the white balance, which will take more time, and the image won't look as consistent. So make sure this is dialed in. Second step is to apply my LUT. And so a LUT is just a lookup table, which is basically a one-click color preset that you can drag and drop over your footage to transform your log footage into cinematic color graded footage. It's really simple. You basically just drag the LUT onto your clip in your editing software. So I use Final Cut Pro, and then your footage will go from gray and lifeless to rich and cinematic in seconds, especially if you have the right LUT. Here's a pro tip that I can't actually believe I'm giving away. When you're filming in log, I recommend you connect an external monitor to your camera and upload your LUT directly into the external monitor. So as you're filming in log, you can see what the image or what the footage will look like after your color grading. So this lets you dial in your settings, like your exposure, your lighting, with more precision, instead of kind of guessing what you need to do to make the image look better. I have a couple example images here of what it looked like as log, and then what it looked like when I just dragged my LUT on top. So there's this one, and there's this one. You can see what a huge difference it makes, especially if you use one LUT consistently. That's really what's going to create that cohesive premium look that's going to make your brand instantly recognizable. If you want the LUT I use, feel free to purchase it here. You can also DM me and I can send you the link as well. Happy to do that. And then step 3 is, so the first 2 steps are really all you need to create to go from this left side to this right side. But sometimes I make some minor adjustments to the image. If you've properly exposed the shot, it should basically be ready to go. But I usually make a small tweak. I usually raise the highlights a little bit to make this kind of a little bit brighter. I drop the shadows to add a little bit more contrast, And sometimes I raise the midtones to just bring the brightness of the image up overall. But again, very, very small tweaks, not doing too much to the image. My main takeaway that I want you to have from this is color grading isn't not really complicated. It's actually really simple, but it is important to have a cohesive look across all your videos and your content, because that's what's going to make it feel intentional and premium, and that's what's going to separate the personal brands and the creators who look like they have a team behind them from those who don't. It's just going to feel better to look at. People are going to watch it for longer. People are going to share it more. It's just going to build that brand and brand credibility way better than if you don't put effort into the videos. And lastly, I want to talk about my creative workflow. This is kind of like a bonus section, but I follow this process every single time to produce this content consistently. All the stuff we went over, gear, lighting, color grading, it doesn't really mean anything if you don't have a repeatable process to actually create the content, create the videos, and take it from idea to finished video. My process looks like a Notion content pipeline, and I create an idea and I basically drag it as it goes along, from idea to scripting to ready to film to ready to edit in progress, to needs revision, to rejected, to approved, to posted. Super simple. I'm going to take you through my 9-step creative workflow. First, I create an idea, right? So I would just add an idea here. I add just the hook, the concept, my initial thoughts. And eventually I have a ton of ideas in my content bank that I can pull from when I go to create content. When I have the right idea, then I move it into the scripting stage, right? And so from here, when the video is in the scripting stage, I script it. I either script it word for word, or I just add bullet points, like talking points about what I want to talk about. Knowing kind of what I'm going to say, either exactly word for word or just in general, saves me a ton of time before I even press record, and make sure that I hit the topics that I actually want to. Once it's scripted, then I move it to ready to film, and then I get ready to film it. So I first film my A-roll with my full cinematic setup, with my lights, with everything like that, with my microphone, the A-roll kind of that I talked about in step 1. And then if the video needs specific B-roll shots that I don't already have from my giant B-roll bank of footage that I've been filming for years, then I capture that as well. But typically I just film the A-roll, and then, my editor adds B-roll that's already pre-filmed when he goes to edit. Step 4 is, so I actually color grade my footage. I color grade it before I send it to my editor, just because I enjoy the color grading process. I apply my LUT like I talked about, make some small adjustments to the exposure, to white balance. Every clip gets the same treatment, again, which creates a consistent cinematic look across my video. Then I basically export my color graded footage and upload it to this site called frame.io. This is what a lot of filmmakers and people who take content seriously use. And so I upload it into folders organized by month. So right now it's April. So I would upload the video into the April folder, and then within that month folder within April, I would have 2 folders. One is A-roll, one is B-roll. So I would upload it in the appropriate folder there. This basically keeps my footage organized, and my editor can find what they need. Step 6, I then basically link the A-roll that I just uploaded to Frame to the specific video in my Notion pipeline. So when my editor basically sees the video in Ready to Edit, if he clicks it, he can go in and see the link to that specific piece of A-roll that he's going to be building off of, to keep everything clear. Then he's going to move the video into Ready to Edit and begin editing. Pretty self-explanatory. When they're done editing, I'm going to review the video, and when I'm satisfied, if it meets my standards, if I feel like it's a good reflection of my brand and everything looks good, then I'm going to accept and post it. If not, I'm going to add specific revisions inside this software, frame.io, and send it back to the editor to fix those up. This system I use is really common because it works, right? Like every piece of content is clearly in one stage or another. Nothing gets lost, nothing gets forgotten, and my content goes out consistently every single week without me spending all my time on it. So guys, that's the end of this tutorial of how to build a cinematic personal brand. If you are an entrepreneur and you want help building a cinematic personal brand that, you know, doesn't just look pretty, but actually converts clients with content, like my own, like my clients, feel free to book in a call with me here. You could also click the first link in the description of this video on YouTube and book in a chat with me there. I hope this was valuable to you. I hope you got a lot of information out of it, and I hope you actually start applying it. And again, if you have any questions, DM me the word cinematic on Instagram and I'll get back to you. All right, guys, thanks for the time. See you in the next one.